Beirut's Dahiya neighborhood is shaken by Israeli airstrikes as over a dozen terrorist headquarters are demolished in less than 20 minutes. This came on the same day as over 250 Hezbollah rockets were fired into northern and central Israel, causing damage and casualties. Over the last 24 hours, there were also extensive ground maneuvers, and the IDF spokesperson announced that in recent weeks, over 150 Hezbollah positions in Lebanon were eliminated, and dozens of terrorists were captured, and stocks of weapons and ammunition as well were also revealed and seized. All of this is happening against the background of intense diplomatic activity aimed at reaching a long-term ceasefire. Israel has reportedly agreed in principle to a settlement in Lebanon, but Iranian officials are reportedly worried that the current situation leaves Israel in a good position to keep Hezbollah weakened for a very long time. Some in the Iranian regime seem to think that there is a way to change the equation through continued conflict, even though their proxy has already been strategically defeated. At the same time, Iran is trying to initiate nuclear negotiations with European powers while also renewing threats to hit Israel with a large attack. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, during the last 2 weeks, the Kfir Brigade, an infantry unit of the IDF, eliminated dozens of terrorists in the Jabalia area, adding to the total of over 1,000 Hamas terrorists who have been eliminated in the northern part of the Gaza Strip in the last 2 months. Meanwhile, details are emerging of the vast black market that is stolen humanitarian aid that Hamas has set up all over the Gaza Strip, adding to the strain on the civilian population. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 416th day of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, all the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. All of them are under the guidance and the leadership of the axis of evil in the Middle East, the Islamic Republic of Iran. A moment before we begin, I ask you to support us and click on the subscribe button so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground, and subscribe to TBN Israel. Speaking of supporting us, I also want to introduce our sponsor for today's video, Magen David Adom, the medical first response team that has been caring for the sick, injured, and wounded in this country for almost 100 years. But first, the news. Sunday was one of the most intense days of fighting in the north since the outbreak of the war, after the heavy salvos fired into the Israeli territory from Lebanon during the day, which included between 250 and 300 rockets, missiles, and UAVs, and caused extensive damage as well as some casualties. The IDF spokesperson in Arabic tweeted, "Anyone who thinks he can dictate terms better tour the Dahiya tonight and understand the reality himself instead of relying on Hezbollah's false propaganda." Minutes later, Israeli fighter jets attacked 12 military headquarters of the terrorist organization in the Dahiya area in the late evening raid. Amongst the headquarters that were attacked were those of Hezbollah's intelligence directorate, the organization's Shore-to-Sea missile unit, and Hezbollah's Unit 4400, which is responsible for transferring weapons from Iran through Syria to Lebanon. Israel did this despite a warning by Hezbollah early Saturday morning, which said that the attacks on Beirut would be answered with attacks on Tel Aviv, a central Israeli city. The IDF spokesperson's unit stated that from these complexes, Hezbollah manages the fighting against the Israeli civilians and direct its terror activities to harm the citizens of the State of Israel. All the targets attacked were deliberately located by Hezbollah within the civilian population. This is another example of the cynical use by the Hezbollah terrorist organization of the Lebanese civilians as human shields. Before the attack, many measures were taken to minimize the chance of harming civilians, including preliminary intelligence gathering, precise observation, and prior warnings to evacuate the population in the area. In related news, the IDF spokesperson's office announced on Sunday that the battalion combat teams of Golani 188, the Fire Brigade 282nd, and the Yalam Unit Combat Engineers under the command of Division 36 have been operating for about 2 months in several targets in southern Lebanon. These forces raided over 150 targets and eliminated dozens of terrorists in airstrikes and face-to-face encounters, located weapons, launchers, underground infrastructures, and combat complexes that posed a threat to the Israeli territory and to the Israeli citizens. From the early days of the ground incursion into southern Lebanon, the combat team of the 188th Battalion established operational control of the area. In fierce battles, often at very close range, they eliminated a large number of terrorists, found and destroyed dozens of weapons depots, hundreds of buildings, and terror infrastructures. The complex terrain of southern Lebanon made this process difficult, but the IDF soldiers adapted and overcame these difficulties. The combat engineers of the Yalam unit also discovered, cleared, and demolished dozens of tunnels, bunkers, and underground infrastructure meant to store weapons, ammunition, and other supplies that were meant to be used in a surprise attack on Israeli civilian communities. In the fire support activity, Brigade 282nd crossed the border into Lebanon with heavy artillery for the first time in 24 years and carried out strikes on Hezbollah targets across the region. This was part of a strategic effort to push the Hezbollah forces north away from the Israeli border. Guys, please continue to help us spread the truth about what's happening in Israel by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. Once again, if you haven't already, please click on the subscribe button to stay tuned to the truth. Yesterday, red alert sirens were heard in the Tel Aviv area and northwards as nearly 300 rockets, missiles, and suicide drones were fired into Israel by Hezbollah. Magen David Adom paramedics reported that they had treated 6 wounded people. The director of the Yarkon region in Magen David Adom, Shachar Cheskilevich, and Magen David Adom paramedic Yehuda Shushna said, "We arrived at the scene with large forces and saw extensive destruction and several vehicles on fire. We began searches of the houses and in nearby streets. The teams at Magen David Adom have been risking their lives in recent days under fire and rockets to save lives in Israel." It does not surprise me at all to hear about the Magen David Adom teams who have run into dangerous places that were still being hit by rockets and suicide drones to take care of the people who had already been wounded. I was born and raised in this country, and everyone who lives here, including Jews, Arabs, and others, knows that if they're ever sick, injured, wounded, hurt, or if they are about to give birth, Magen David Adom will be there to help. Every single day, in war, peace, and everything between, they're on the job saving lives in Israel. But they need our help because their budget comes entirely from donations. So if you want to help them, you can send a donation by visiting www.savelifeisrael.com. Now back to the news, as we switch our focus to events in the Gaza Strip. In a security briefing held on Sunday for government ministers, Major General Eliezer Toledano revealed that from the beginning of October until today, 1,500 terrorists have been eliminated in battles in the northern Gaza Strip, while 1,160 others have been arrested. Last night, after the rocket fire into the Gaza borders communities during Sabbath, Saturday, the IDF spokesperson in Arabic, Lieutenant Colonel Avichai Aderi, published an evacuation message to the residents of the area in Sajaiya, from which a rocket was launched towards the Beirut area, advising them to evacuate their homes ahead of IDF forces activity in that location. But while the IDF has had great successes in defeating Hamas on the battlefield, there is another battle that is going on in the Gaza Strip, and that's battle that Hamas is having more successes in. This is the battle to control the food supply to the civilian population. In the Gaza Strip, flour has become a symbol of chaos and struggle for survival. While flour enters the Gaza Strip through the World Food Program and other international institutions, and is meant to provide basic substances for refugees, much of it is hijacked and offered for sale on the black market at high prices. Scenes of endless queues and an atmosphere of despair have become routine in Gaza as bread prices soar and many cannot afford the most basic necessities of life. Last week alone, 109 out of 158 trucks that entered the Gaza Strip were looted, illustrating the depth of the economic crisis and the brutal control of the Hamas terrorist organization over the lives of the residents. A moment before we proceed to the negotiations between Israel and Lebanon, I want to introduce you to our news site that brings you in-depth coverage and ongoing reports on what's happening in Israel. Please visit tbnisrael.com and stay tuned to the truth. Hours after U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein held discussions with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday, sources in Lebanon, the United States, and Israel confirmed that Israel has given the green light, subject to a final decision by the cabinet to sign the settlement in Lebanon. It was reported that Israel raised three main reservations with Hochstein. First, regarding Israel's freedom of action in case of violations from the Lebanese side. Second, the demand to clarify formulations related to negotiations on disputed border points, an issue that Israel refuses to commit to. And third, reducing French involvement in the monitoring mechanism against the backdrop of strained relations with Paris. The tension with France, it should be recalled, stems from Paris's support of the International Criminal Court arrest warrants issued for Netanyahu and Gallant, and for a recent decision by France to exclude Israeli defense companies from arms exhibitions. Therefore, Israel decided to demand the reduction of France's involvement in the settlement to the minimum of sending soldiers to the enforcement mechanism in Lebanon. However, sources in Jerusalem emphasized that these are not substantive disagreements and estimated that an agreement can be reached within a few days. In fact, today, U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Dan Shapiro, is expected to arrive in Israel for talks on the security aspects of the agreement. The settlement is indeed close, but it will not happen tomorrow. Even after the talks that Hochstein held in Lebanon and Israel, there are still final gaps to be closed, and Hochstein will soon return to Washington. Meanwhile, a Lebanese media portal published a story on Monday morning, including some new details from the American ceasefire agreement that was handed over yesterday to the parliament in Beirut as Hochstein was about to arrive. According to the report, Israel had already agreed to the outline of the proposal, which does not seem to include compromises on its part. The agreement includes a change in the force supervising the border between Israel and Lebanon, which will not be identical in its composition to Resolution 1701, which set ceasefire conditions at the end of the Second Lebanon War. In the renewed agreement, the multinational force will be led by the United States and France. In addition, Israel added conditions that expand the pushing of Hezbollah away from the border. In 2006, as you recall, Hezbollah was pushed north beyond the Litani River line, but now Israel is demanding that Hezbollah's infrastructure, even beyond the Litani line, will be demolished. While all of this is going on in Lebanon, Israel also is working very hard to cut off the supply lines to Hezbollah that bring weapons and ammunition from Iran through Syria. In order to weaken Hezbollah's logistical infrastructure in Syria, Israel is bombing Iranian centers on Syrian territory, and the Iranians are not happy about it. In fact, the Iranian news agency Tasnim, which is a mouthpiece for the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, published a quote on Sunday from Ali Larijani, one of the most senior advisors to Iran's leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. According to Larijani, Iranian military officials are planning various options to respond to Israel. We've been hearing these threats from Iran to launch a major strike against Israel for months now. And as we all know, talk is cheap. The previous 2 Iranian attacks on Israel were not very impressive, and I can say for my own personal self that I'm not afraid of them. However, it's also apparent that Israel has a big challenge on our northern border. Although we've done tremendous damage to Hezbollah, they are still able to inflict damage on Israel as well. I think we should not be too optimistic about the ceasefire that's being negotiated, because the party we're negotiating with is the internationally recognized government of Lebanon, which isn't really in control of what's happening in that country, Lebanon. Iran and Hezbollah are the parties that have real power there. And this war won't be over until they decide that they've suffered enough defeats and they're ready to take a break. Even then, they will only be taking a break until they're ready to start another war with Israel, just like the break that they took following the 2006 Second Lebanon War until October 8, 2023, when they began firing rockets at us once again, together with Hamas. Iran and Hezbollah are motivated by religious and ideological goals and don't care how many ordinary Lebanese, Palestinian, Syrians, Israelis, Americans, or even ordinary Iranian people have to suffer and die to achieve these goals. The only way to achieve a long-term situation of peace and stability is to disarm Hezbollah and defeat Iran on the strategic level. This will probably have to include a change of regime in Tehran, but that's something that has been obvious for a very long time. We'll see if that changes with the incoming Trump administration in the United States. During his first term, President Trump did a few things that should have been done a long time ago, like moving the United States Embassy to Jerusalem and recognizing Israeli sovereignty on the Golan Heights. Maybe in this second term, he'll be ready to finally sort out the Islamic regime in Iran, which should have been done a long time ago. With that having been said, the next story we have to cover as we come to the end of today's report is about reports that have surfaced in the international media outlets regarding Iran's outreach to European countries. It seems the regime in Tehran wants to try and relieve the pressure it finds itself under because of its obvious attempts to pursue nuclear weapons, which it is obligated not to do by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty it signed decades ago. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which oversees nuclear activity around the world, recently announced that Iran has accumulated over 60 times the amount of nuclear material allowed under the nuclear agreement, approaching military-grade levels. The agency imposed several sanctions on Iran as a result. Now, Iran is trying to approach several European powers to try and get this decision by the International Atomic Energy Agency reversed because the new US administration comes into office on January 20th of next year. According to media reports, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany have agreed to meet with Iranian officials to hear their side of the story and consider what to do next. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on any developments with Iran, and we ask you to help us spread the truth by sharing our videos on YouTube, subscribing to this YouTube channel, and following us on social media. We conclude today's report with an update on the murder of the Jewish organization Chabad member, Rabbi Tzvi Kogan, in the United Arab Emirates, and once again this story includes an Iranian angle. According to the initial assessment by the investigators, this was an organized terrorist attack carried out by a squad of Uzbek mercenaries on behalf of Iran's intelligence agencies. Iran did this in response to recent Israeli strikes on its territory and the elimination of senior Iranian officials. Iran continues to use squads of mercenaries to carry out these kinds of crimes so that they can maintain possible deniability and prevent direct accusations. This is the pattern that we've seen in previous Iranian attacks against the Israeli citizens and interests in Thailand, Sweden, and Africa. In this case, the United Arab Emirates is cooperating with the Mossad team to investigate the incident, but the suspects fled to Turkey, increasing concerns that Turkey is becoming a haven for terror squads. The incident has also been a test for the relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, one of the key partners in the regional normalization process known as the Abraham Accords. According to intelligence analysts, the murder is also intended to deter other Arab and Muslim countries from joining normalization initiatives which Israel hopes to expand with the support of the new US administration. Once again speaking about incoming US President Donald Trump, he's widely expected to want to continue the process of promoting a regional alliance that will include Israel and Saudi Arabia against the Iranian axis of resistance. Iran, on the other hand, is doing everything to prevent this for obvious reasons. Leaving aside geostrategic matters, the investigation into Rabbi Kogan continues, and so does the drama surrounding the recent move by the International Criminal Court in The Hague to issue warrants for the arrest of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. On Sunday, a spokesperson for the court appeared to be offering a way out of the crisis by saying that if Israel provides proof, internal Israeli investigations of the accusations against the two officials by Israel's judiciary are proceeding, the arrest warrants might be cancelled. However, there have already been strong reactions to the ICC warrants from the United States. Senator Lindsey Graham sharply attacked the court, calling it an anti-Israel body, and threatened sanctions on countries that would cooperate with the arrests. There is no comparison here, he said. Israel is defending itself against terror, and this comparison is unacceptable. Regarding President-elect Donald Trump, sources in his circle have stated that he sees the decision as an attempt to weaken Israel on the international stage. Trump is known for his clear stance on unwavering support for Israel's security, and the new administration is expected to act to strengthen the alliance with Jerusalem while standing against international moves aimed at isolating it. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to update you on developments in this matter. We ask you to please continue to spread the truth and, most importantly, pray for the people of Israel. So guys, please continue to pray for Israel, for the IDF soldiers that are fighting in Lebanon, in the Gaza Strip, in Judea and Samaria. Pray for the swift return of our hostages from the Gaza Strip. We still have 101 hostages in the Gaza Strip, and we pray that they are all safe, healthy, and that they will be reunited with their loved ones very soon. Pray for the peace of the residents of northern Israel, that they can return to their homes without the fear of incoming rockets on a daily basis. The most important thing that you can do is unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem, because this is a spiritual war, and together we will win.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.